I don't think any of the career decisions that I have made were driven by money. Um, I'm actually very clear that none of them were driven by money. Obviously, you negotiate salary and packages and things like this, but I've found that you have to make the decision to change your career for the right reasons, and money is not the right reason.
Karim, thank you so much for joining us on Live Long and Prosper. It's so good to see you again after a while.
Great to see you too, Cesar. I'm in good form, so I can't wait to see you face to face very soon.
Yeah, very soon. I'm looking forward to that. So let's talk a little bit about your life. I'd love to get into a couple of key pivotal changes in your career. I know of a few that you've done that you've known each other for the last, 10, 15 years. But the ones do you think are the most pivotal? And then I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what that change was, and then what went into that thinking. How did your career aspirations fare into it? Your personal life, concept, thinking about money. How do you go about making that decision? So let's start with maybe the first major pivotal decision that you think is, and you've had so many changes in your life from US to Europe to US to Asia to US. Yeah, I think it'd be fascinating for our listeners to learn more.
Thanks. Well, I think that the first fundamental decision that I think affected my career, certainly, in my life overall, is the one that I made right after I finished college, to have my first job, not in France where I was born and where I had sort of built all my life so far, not in Morocco where my family is from, but in Hong Kong. I did my military service in Hong Kong. I could have done it in France. I could have done it in Spain as well, where I had an offer to do it. And essentially, I did my military service in a company. And that was sort of the two choices that you had in France at the time. It was compulsory, so you could either do 10 months in the army, or if a company wanted you and you had a high enough degree, you could have an opportunity to do it overseas. And when I got the offer in Hong Kong, I'm going to go and see what it's like. I have never been to Hong Kong. I mean, I had traveled to a bunch of places, but I had never been to Hong Kong, and was really attracted to do that. And it really dramatically changed me. It changed my career for a number of reasons. One, because it really forces you to very quickly adapt to different cultures, different ways of working. And it taught me a tremendous amount there. And two, I was very fortunate that because I was, still very young and completely malleable, I had this appetite for learning, and I was given way higher responsibilities than my capabilities at the time. And because of that, you learn very fast, but you also, discover some things about yourself, and learn a lot more about the company and the environment that you would normally. And I was really, really fortunate that I, going back to the time when I had to make the decisions, I don't think I had any hesitation whatsoever. And it really was a vital decision for what happened next for me.
And did concepts of how much you were earning, money, those kinds of things play into that decision, or it was really about the exposure and a new exciting place?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think any of the career decisions that I have made were driven by money. I'm actually very clear that none of them were driven by money. Obviously, you negotiate salary and packages and things like this, but I've found that you have to make the decision to change your career for the right reasons, and money is not the right reasons. You have to make them because you see a challenge that's interesting, because you are going to learn, because you're going to work with great people. The best example of that for me is, I had a great position before I joined Google. So just for background, I joined Google in Australia in 2007. I had a great position working for essentially one of the largest publisher of newspapers, magazines, and online sites in Australia called Fairfax. I was reporting to the CEO. I was, very comfortable in many ways. While I certainly don't mean to say that sort of Google wasn't clearly obvious to many people that Google was incredibly successful, a lot of very senior people who were advising me told me not to go to Google then. And Google was small in Australia, and essentially I was moving to run Google in Australia, and it was really, really small at the time. Obviously, Google is multiple X's the size of Fairfax now, and then most of the media companies in Australia. So it seems fairly obvious as a move now. But then when I moved, it was a much, much smaller book of business that I was going to look after. And my package overall was much, much smaller than what I was having. So it was really not about money. It was clearly understanding that I would learn a lot because while I had exposure to online, Google was full into the internet space in a much stronger way, that I would learn a different way of working. And that really changed a lot of the theories I had around management. And therefore, obviously money is important and how you figure things out in your life. I linked a lot of ways to your capabilities on the money front. I think it's really important not to make career decisions based on money.
Yeah, I'd love to get a little bit into another pivotal change that you made. Like, I think you left Google when you were in an incredible position. You're running all of APAC and very senior leader, very respected. And then you joined another startup and you moved countries to Stripe in the US. And I'd love for you to maybe talk a little bit about that decision, the thinking, and all the different factors that went into that.
I know that the decision was very difficult in a lot of ways, and it was both driven by family and driven by sort of my need to do something different. So just to give some level of background, I had spent 6 years in Asia, and I had the pleasure of working with you and many other people that are incredibly accomplished and really wonderful to work with. It was really a great run that we had in Asia, and the business did incredibly well during that period of time, from a place where the business had a lot of issues before I moved back to Asia. But after 5 years, I spent 6 years overall in the business there. But after 5 years, I started to feel like I wasn't learning anymore, and the days seemed to essentially repeat themselves over and over. And I was traveling a ton, and that was putting a toll on me and the family. And at the time, both our daughters, we have 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, and both our daughters were in boarding school in the US because they wanted continuity in their study. Because we had moved, initially to Japan, then to Singapore, so it wasn't just like we had settled in one country. So we were very far from the family. So my wife was really pushing to ensure that we get closer to them, and I wanted to get closer to them as well. I missed them, and our son as well was, at a time where he needed continuity and he needed to get into school in the US in 6th grade, which is a lot easier to enter than later grades. So we needed to do that. We also had a house in California, which we bought the first time we moved to California, and had rebuilt, and he was just done. So there was a lot of impetus from a family perspective. And then from my side, I think there was a reality that essentially the best jobs at Google, aside from my job that I absolutely love running Asia, and my job before that, starting the mobile business teams, the best jobs at Google are really driven by leaders that have product and engineering backgrounds. And I didn't have that. And I wholeheartedly agree with how Google is set up, in the sense that I understand why these roles are going to product engineering leaders. I think there are opportunities for Google to veer outside of that, but that's how the company is being run, and it's been very successful in following that route. So I had to go somewhere else to be able to find a role where I had more ability to make decisions on the product and engineering side. And at Google, I worked very closely with you, and I felt like I had a lot of influence on what we're doing on product engineering, but I wasn't making decisions. So when I decided to leave and we decided to move back to the US, I had discussion with a number of companies, and I was very fortunate that Stripe offered me the ability to run product engineering for a number of new products they wanted to launch. So I started Banking as a Service, Stripe Treasury, Stripe Issuing, run Stripe Capital, Lending as a Service, for a bit of time run Stripe Connections and Stripe Climate as well. So I was very lucky that that company allowed me to run product engineering teams, and I learned a tremendous amount during that time as well. So it was a great run. But again, it was about obviously the family side of the decision, but also the learning potential for me as part of the decision-making process rather than a monetary consideration there.
And how do you find the experience of going from, business? And to be honest, I feel like in Asia, you were very, very involved in Google Pay and a lot of the products we built on NBU in a very, very pivotal role. Not being light, day-to-day running it, but I think, at least for me, your advice and your perspective was exceedingly important. But how is it actually running and doing the transition to running product and engineering teams day to day? And how is that what do you learn? Like, what advice would you give to someone else who's looking to make that kind of transition in their careers?
I think first, a lot of leaders are very, very capable of making that transition. There are a lot of business leaders that don't necessarily have product engineering background, in the same way as product and engineering leaders also have the ability to run full companies. And be very successful in talking to customers and gaining traction there. For me, to some degree, was very confronting, particularly in the first few months, because I was going into a totally new business area for us. Like, payments is very, very complex, and I really had to learn a tremendous amount around payments. And what really is important is that getting into very detailed understanding of the problems that you're trying to solve for users is a lot more complex than sort of my sort of more thin layer of understanding when we were at Google, because we had great product engineering leads that were really providing a lot more support from that perspective. And at Stripe, I really needed to read a lot more about sort of the product needs at customer level, about the architecture of our products and sort of the decisions we're making longer term, about how it worked with the rest of Stripe's ecosystem. So it was a pretty steep learning curve and long learning curve as well. Like I think you have, if you want to do that transition, you have to be ready to spend a lot of time learning and a lot of time reading and a lot of time asking a lot of questions to people. I don't think the asking question part is different to any role, but I think you have to be a lot more ready not to assume too much because of sort of past knowledge, but really question the teams a lot and learn from them.
That's great perspective. And you're right. Like one of the beauties of our career is every few years, we can switch to a different skill set, a different industries. And I guess the advice you gave there is very pertinent to anybody doing this, especially with AI coming after, like, every industry at this point. Like, we'll have to become much better at learning about new industries, new roles, new skill sets that we can, acquire and demonstrate.
The thing that I didn't mention here as well, which I think is really critical and important, like, I did nothing in APAC or in mobile before when I was at Google, or in other roles, without a phenomenal team around me. And the way you structure the team, meaning the capabilities that you have around you, people that have different skill sets, people that disagree with you, is what essentially makes the outcomes good. not yourself. And as long as you really understand that and really build the right teams and capabilities around you, then you have an opportunity to be successful. You still need to execute and you still need to collaborate appropriately, but nothing is done without the right people.
How have you thought about building great teams? I mean, I've seen some of the teams you've built and they've been, extremely high performing, experts in their areas, but get along really well. Like, how have you found these people? How have you thought about structuring the team, giving them the right incentives, and then developing them?
First, you have to have real clarity with regards to what you expect the main tenets of a job to be. Really understanding, for example, when we were working on our China business. So when I moved back to APAC, for context, the China business for Google was, not growing. It was actually negative growth year on year, which was really odd for Google in many ways. And obviously, as many people would know, Google had a tremendous amount of restrictions with regards to what it could do in China. It could not provide any search results. We had sort of a display network, but it was a very small business. But we had a fairly large team, product teams, engineering teams, sales teams, but we're just not getting any traction. And really understanding that the way the team was operating before and essentially trying to run things as they were when we had search in China was just not the way to do it. And I needed someone who was more partner-driven and strategy-driven to be able to think about how we would change the way we look at the market and do deals at local level to enable Chinese companies to advertise on Google at global level. So more of an export business rather than a local business. And I once I identified this sort of core set of skills that I wanted to have, I basically zeroed in onto one of the executives that I had encountered at Google, who I thought was excellent at these skills. Who you work very closely with, who now runs Asia Pacific for Google, Scott Beaumont. And it was controversial at the time. Like a lot of people within Google, including the leadership team that I was part of, was saying, "Hey, why are you going to bring someone non-Chinese? Why are you bring a British person who's never lived in China to be running that?" And he ended up being incredibly successful, very successful. He straight away did all the right things. He learned Chinese very quickly. He really spent time understanding the business that we had and spent time with clients and understanding the opportunity. And he was both then successful in driving China to be one of the greatest contributors to growth for Google globally for a period of time, but also contributed well beyond that in our Asia Pacific team, overall in our Asia Pacific leadership team, to try and continue to improve the way we're collaborating together and bringing ideas to other colleagues, mentoring other colleagues. So again, zeroing on the capabilities that you want to see, making sure that you have the people that are going to help each other was really important. And Scott was one example, but I could have a story about every single person on the leadership team because they all really, including yourself, obviously, who was very kind to give us a lot of your time as well as the lead for Google Engineering and Tez and Google Pay for Asia to really help us think differently about how we should run the business.
So maybe before we jump into thinking about how you think about money and finances, I just want to touch a little bit. You went from private companies to running a public company now. And that's a very different role and skill set. And I'm sure it's been an interesting experience. And so what was the thought behind it? And obviously, I'd love to know a little bit more about how the experience has been and how you've learned, or whatever you can say. I know you're a public company CEO. That's also constrained in what you can say.
Yeah, there's different constraints now with regards to what I can say. But listen, I realized at some stage that while I've learned a lot at Stripe. I wanted to make more decisions myself and being able to test myself in running a business. We didn't talk much about it, but a lot of my experiences, including at Google, were really about turning around businesses. At Google, I talked briefly about China, but Japan was not in a good state as well. When I went back to Asia, before Google, I turned around businesses in South Korea, where I lived for a period of time, in Australia as well. This business that I'm running now, called Cardlytics, was not in a good place financially, was not in a good place from a tech and product perspective, and faced a number of other challenges that probably are harder for me to get into. But I really like the idea of having that challenge again to turn around the business that I think has fundamentally incredible foundations. We have deals with all the key banks in the US, and essentially serve the tech and the content for rewards into the ecosystem. We bought a business that essentially helps retailers understand the known and unknown customers, where they shop, how much, and provides the insights that then provide the capabilities for CPG companies to buy into the retail media network environment. So the foundations of the business are incredible. And on top of that, the business is in two areas, which, I understand: advertising and, finance, banking. So I thought it was the right opportunity for me to test myself as a CEO. I've been there just over a year now. We've made a lot of changes. We've gone from essentially a run rate of 50 plus a million loss in adjusted EBITDA to now last quarter of close to 4 million adjusted EBITDA positive. So we still have a lot of obstacles on our way, and a lot more we deliver. But again, it's been a very similar playbook: be clear on the strategy, get the right people in, both bring people from external, but also promoting internally, and then executing. Strategy is really important, but you really need to execute when you wanting to accomplish things in the company. And we're really trying to drive hard to execute so that we can be much better partners for the banks that are partnering with us, and that we can deliver much stronger results for the investors of the business.
So turning from career, I want to talk a little bit about money. As far as I know, Karim, you weren't born rich. You've, professionally been very successful. How do you learn about money, and where did your concepts of finance, how to think about money, how did that originate?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, because I really think that at least in France, where I grew up, but I see that with my kids being in the US education system, we're really terrible teaching young people about how to take care of money or invest. And we just keep on making the same mistakes consistently, not providing the data and insights that people need, providing sort of the wrong level of incentives, for essentially people to spend money as quickly as they earn it, rather than figure out how they save or invest the money. I mean, even the whole way we explain kids how essentially they're going to get, some level of dollars for the chores that they are doing, even at home, essentially is an incentive to spend it as quickly as possible, because the following week they're going to get more money. So there's really very little concept of saving everywhere. As you know, my wife is very passionate about this area, and she's worked in finance and was a financial advisor, and had her own financial advice company at some stage in Australia. But for me personally, I would say I was terrible for a very, very long period of my life with regards to how I treated money. When I lived in Hong Kong, just when I started my first job, I was basically spending my paycheck. When I lived in Korea, after that, I continued buying things just because the money was available, not really thinking about how I would save. So I didn't have sort of the right understanding and prioritization of how to think about money. So that's one side, and we can go deeper into it and sort of how I'm thinking about where I invest now. But two, I would say as well, there's not only the education about money, but there's also then the decisions that you want to make as an individual with regards to what's important to you. And some of these decisions are not necessarily rational money decision. And I think at some stage as an individual, you have to be comfortable that you're making a decision that's not necessarily rational from a money perspective, but rational from a work-life balance perspective or family perspective. So to give you an example of that, we lived in 9 countries with a family. So we moved a ton. I made the decision that I wanted every time we moved to make it as comfortable as possible for the family and myself, obviously. So we overspent on renting houses when we moved to different places, houses or apartments in different places, just to make sure that it felt comfortable and easier just to experience a different place. And we all like food, so we always spend on food and restaurants and things like this to create the right environment. I've always spent on holidays. I want great experiences, memories with the kids, and whether it's going into sort of attraction parks and doing lots of things to spending great holidays in Italy or France or where we've been. I've always decided that the experience and the memories that we have with the kids is more important than keeping some additional dollars that I can invest. And no, it's not great because some of these dollars could have been hard at work and be valued a lot more, but I'm comfortable with this decision with regards to how I want to run my life. And, investing is tricky and different for many people, but you need to have sort of that understanding or that compass for you of what's the right decision, what's the wrong decision, and not worry about what that money could have given to you in sort of the future.
So like having the right principles in place as you're thinking about how to put your money to work for you. But going back to what you said, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's the same thing with regards to then how you make investment decisions with regards to defining what's your prioritization, what's your risk appetite, where do you put a rigid obstacle with regards to how you're going to invest versus where you have a loose obstacles that you might change. So, again, I'll give you an example that you're hopefully very familiar with. I hope we can say that in the podcast, but I've invested in Arta. And I never invest in single companies. And the reason why I never invest in single companies is because I don't feel I have the time to do the right due diligence to understand the business, as well as people that are incredibly skilled at doing that, venture capitalists do on a daily basis. And I've got a lot of friends that are in the VC business, and they're much, much better than me at figuring out the potential of a company. But so it's a mostly hard wall, but when you have incredible people that you believe in, you can move the wall a little bit, and that's what I did in Arta. But I don't want to invest in other single companies because it doesn't make sense for me to spend the time in doing that. I'd rather a VC does it and not put some money in a VC fund.
I wanted to go back a little bit in that conversation because you started something very interesting about talking about how we teach our kids about money and the mental framework. And maybe I can ask the question 2 different ways. Like, how have you approached it with your kids? Or alternatively, like, what is advice you would give to like the 18-year-old Karim or the 21-year-old Karim about how to think about finances, money, and so that they get, they're able to chart a better or a different course?
Yeah. Well, so if I look back and sort of what I talk to kids about, so that there's a few core insights and principles, or most insights, I guess, that we should all have and understand. And obviously, as the data comes in, you might change them, but there's a few things that are clearly in my mind and clearly would have potentially changed, even more dramatically some of our financial positions if I knew them several years ago, several decades ago rather. One, real estate is so important. It's pretty clear from all of the charts that you see that I'm talking about real estate versus income here, not necessarily versus investments. But if you look at how real estate has tracked over the last 20, 30 years versus the income that most people have gained, it's just grown dramatically faster. Investing in real estate as early as you can in the right location, is going to be a tremendous help for life, which is why it's really a problem that young people are struggling to get loans and have an ability to buy properties today, or are priced out in some places. We should really encourage that, because that will help society as a whole. Like, if young people can buy homes, not only they should be doing well, but also it will set them for life. Two, obviously I understood the concept, so the math makes a ton of sense, but I think no one really applies the concept of compounding interest as well as they should.
It's the one secret power that everybody should understand.
It is so obvious. It's just like, why have not been doing that like more diligently for years and years and years? And you have to have the discipline to do it outside of sort of the other considerations that I talked earlier about with regards to your priorities and risk appetite. But compounding interest is actually quite simple. It should be a priority for everyone to really understand that. And then, again, having a certain level of discipline to understand where you want to put your money and what returns you're going to get from it, rather than being attracted by the purchasing of single shares or single opportunities. That's really important, and that's why I found that it's very, very hard to make single decisions on a company without having the ability to spend enough time. And you listen to all of the great people and great advice, you see how the depths of knowledge that they have across businesses. Like, I'm listening to a podcast now that John Collison, an interview that John Collison has done with Charlie Munger just before he died. I'm only halfway through it, but the wealth of advice that he has on investing is just, I'll never be able to, even if I spend the rest of my life now studying it, I will never be able to get to the wealth of advice that he has, and essentially following professionals and investing in fund or indexes that are far greater than your capabilities is important. And then finally, I'd say, one sentence that I think came from Jeff Bezos, but correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think he said that it's really important to invest in things that will change, not things that stay the same. So when you have a great understanding of, how, take a very easy example, how the internet was going to change commerce, like investing in all these companies that are essentially going to drive the commerce revolution, Amazon being obviously the key one here, is a great investment. So understanding these trends and essentially allowing you to have a ramp into these new areas is really important. And then the one that's more risky, but that I think are very useful to keep in mind. And again, it depends on your risk appetite as an investor. But if you see a place where you disagree with the consensus, then you should essentially bet on it. If the consensus is wrong, you're going to make a lot of money because the movement is going to go your way. But you've got to be prepared that there's a lot of smart people that are following a trend, and if the consensus is right, you're gonna lose. But if you have conviction, and it's important to have conviction as an investor, if you have conviction and you think that a lot of people are wrong, you often are going to have incredible returns as part of your investments.
Yeah, that's That's absolutely fantastic advice in terms of how you think about, betting on professionals, structured ways, and the big superpower, which is essentially understanding the value of compounding. And a lot of what we are trying to do with Arda is get people to start thinking about these things earlier and making it super easy for them to do.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but I'll jump on that because, obviously you go back into some of the things that have happened in your life and some of the things that you hear. And again, one of the things that you hear from Charlie Munger when you sort of hear his interviews is that he's fairly dark on some parts of the ecosystem with regards to, some of the wealth advisors, for example. And again, there are some phenomenal wealth advisors, some are friends of mine. But I do remember that when I started looking at financials, we went to see a wealth advisor in Australia who was basically there to take a cut of my money and not provide any useful advice. And that's why I really like the way that you setting things up at Arta as well, which I think is going to be very useful for people. And providing the insights, the data, providing the opportunities to get into some of the funds that have been providing great returns is really important here. And I think people need to get access to the best, get insights to the best, but make a lot of their own decision, not let someone essentially create a plan that is not tied into any of the returns that they will get themselves.
No, that's our goal, which is provide access, provide information, and then make it super easy, right? And let people sort of create the financial future that they want for themselves. And obviously, there are experts around who you can consult for help. You can learn more. But I think being able to put control in people's hands is ultimately a big part of what we're trying to do. And do the same kind of products and financial services that the ultra wealthy have and be able to bring them there. It's been fascinating. I wanted to close with a few slightly different types of questions. So this is a lightning round. And so just whatever you think, it comes to the top of your mind very quickly. So, I'll say a phrase and then there's a underline, like you fill in the rest. So if you want to prosper, never underestimate the power of
compound interest in real estate.
I was hoping you'd say compounding, but that's great. You added real estate to it too. The 3 key ingredients to a long, fulfilling life are
family, friends, and sports.
So true of you. Again, I can clearly see, I could predict those answers. It's beautiful. The simple joy that adds years to my life is?
I don't know if it adds years to my life, but having a nice glass of wine is definitely a simple joy that I really enjoy. No, might not add years, might delete some, but I like it.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for sharing so openly with everyone that's listening.
No, thank you so much for having me, and congrats on everything you're building at Arta. And I look forward to continue to see your successes.